That can run your day.
You know, what it does is you go to the master over there, you have a real appreciation. Yes.
You do that.
I appreciate.
I did that for a couple of years and I don't need to appreciate it anymore.
Isn't that the truth?
I just don't need to appreciate anything. We're waiting on money. That's all.
You were there talking to you when I went over it.
I did talk to him.
I was surprised.
Get his cell
You
phone.
did. Usually I did. I was really surprised. Did I talk to you?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Mr. Baumgartner, do we know, have you heard from Wayne?
I have not heard.
So the,
This afternoon, 3 o'clock, he said, I'll see you at 5:30. That's what I heard from him.
I don't want to wait long, because we have now more to get through, and we have our meeting at 7. I guess we can start and try and catch him up, or,
And I'm going through a little history at first too, so.
so I believe we can begin then. Okay.
As Scott stated earlier, just to clarify, issues with the microphones, every now and then they do lose signal and you'll see the yellow light come on. When we have our updated system, all of that will be updated and those problems should go away for the most part. So we were on scenario D, and I'm gonna just cut here to the fiscal year 25 operating funds remaining. And this is funds available for both the county and the school. So we started making our initial cuts. You remember we cut $100,000 from employee training, $300,000 from the sheriff's department, probably $100,000 that will be a reduction in overtime. We shifted these fire and rescue laptops and mounting to capital expenditures. We're gonna be cutting $300,000 from different items of maintenance in such in Parks and Recreation. We found an additional, we got our insurance numbers in $744,000 in health insurance cost reduction. We eliminated the assistant county administrator position. It's been on the books for quite some time, and since we weren't having any intention of hiring someone this year, we eliminated that funding to free up the funding for that. We shifted the Microsoft update license in. We'll have to be doing that next year. We can do that, we believe, without any risk to the system, but it's something we inevitably have to do. We reduced the pay increase to 4%, which is an additional $350,000. Through the jail, we realized we had an additional $452,000. This is something we have taken out every year, so we moved the general district court's salary supplements, $41,000. I'm gonna come back to these. These are the items we discussed in the last meeting, but I'll come back to this $200,000. And Jennifer, this $80,000 is?
It is for, people who have left and their salaries were changed because they were a long-term employee, and they hired somebody at a lesser salary, so it was just savings in those areas.
And so that freed up an additional $3.7 million, $3.8 million that can add to the funds available. This left us $7.9 million in operating funds. The increase in operating funds for the schools, SCBS, is $5 million. So we subtracted that out. That left us $2.9 million available for new positions, et cetera. And these are the new positions that are still in the budget at this time. The firefighters are up for later discussion when we go to the next chart. But this is as it is with the 16 firefighters at the February and September hire dates, which left us a surplus of $1,032,000. And I'm gonna, just to give a little explanation on this, where it says outside agencies, our recommendations, these aren't hard recommendations where we've met with all departments and decided this should be cut and that shouldn't be cut. These are just rough ideas to give you an idea of the amount of money, because every year the board goes through, meets with all the agencies and makes their own determination. So we weren't trying to steer you into a decision, but we just wanted to give you an idea of what amount of money could be reduced in those outside agencies. So going through all of those, that gives you a possible amount left over to transfer to contingency or to transportation of $1,269,618.
Question. The 1,032,67, where you have that as a surplus, that's savings by the cuts, that's the total amount of cuts. Cutbacks, is that correct?
The cuts are a significant portion of that, yes,
Okay.
the majority of it.
Okay, so 1,032,000 is, we call it surplus, but it's really not a surplus, it's cuts.
It's cuts, but the idea being a surplus, remember, the fact is we shifted certain items to capital expenditures, so those aren't taken into consideration.
Okay.
So I think surplus is a convenient term at this point.
Okay.
So can you go back to the top?
Yes.
So some of these are items that we worked through during the work sessions the last few weeks, and some of them were already in the budget.
Most of the items we've worked through to the 2 rounds of cuts, and I say 2 rounds, it may have gone more than 2 meetings, but I consider it 2 rounds of cutting that we've done.
Okay, and that added up a little bit further down to 7.8, 7.9?
No, that is the funds available. If you look here, we started out with 4 million available, and so it's the difference between the 7.8 minus the 4.105.
Okay, so in our scenarios, we didn't have that much as a balance. So where did that operating available, how did that get tracked? Boy, I don't remember where that comes from.
I'm not sure on the other scenarios. I think all of them are the same up to this point. All 4 are the same with the 4.1 million available. And the difference between all the others, A, B, and C, are the items that are in this area here. I'll show you that real quick. So the additional cuts we really added are the 3.7 million. And I think this is correct. If you look at this, from what we gave you initially in your budget book, we've added an additional 3.7,093,000 in cuts with all of this. That's correct.
I thought our scenarios were near balance, a little bit above or below. And then if we found this 3.8 million in cuts, so why are we not near that number in balance? I'm just not tracking the 4.1 where we had that from before.
I'll have to find the other scenarios to go through those.
Any other supervisor remember track those numbers to get to the 7.9?
I don't have my calculator. What I'm looking at in the top block is there's less operating decreases of 2.5 million. And then when you go down and you add the additional proposed cuts, again, I don't have a calculator to back into that number, but it would seem logical to me that if you added all of those back to the 2.5, is that what you did, Mr. Ballbacher?
Yeah, I think this is the real number here, where it says additional, when scenario D, you had an additional 3.793 million in cuts. I've got the scenario A, so when we gave you the first initial scenarios, this number at 3.7, in the scenario A, that number originally was 2.3 million, scenario B was 2.8 million, scenario C was 3.2 million. I'll send that out to you. And so with each scenario, we've had more and more cuts. And finally getting it to, we got to the 3.7 million. The last time we sent you scenario D, it was at 3.3 million. we also had added the additional 400,000 in revenue up here, which is part of that component. These Go forward. Yes, these are the items that were discussed at the last meeting, when we added more additional cuts. We took out 20,000 part-time for HR, 35,000 advertising in HR. We took out the electoral board salary increase. The sheriff, SRO, we pulled that from the budget. I've talked to the sheriff, and as you know, there was some consternation this created within the department, so we removed this request. The last time you saw it, we had a number in there at a 5% reduction. This takes the entire request out of 10%, so that adds 123,000 back. We've added to the budget $50,000, that's for consulting services for the fire department assessment. We reduced their supplies in the fire department, 25,000. We reduced the communications department overtime, 60,000. Their travel, 18,640. And this last item is on the agenda for discussion is the restructuring and commissioner of revenue. And the number I sent out earlier is a little bit different. We've gone back and looked at these numbers, and we realized that initially there was already $27,000 in the budget for this, for the changes. And what has transpired, that the budget was originally prepared by the previous commissioner of revenue. A new commissioner came in as we looked at it. So this 35,000 is kind of the delta, the change that would be needed to fund the restructure requested, in which you have that documentation in which she's getting ready to go over and go through that for you. But when you, I'm sorry.
So Mike, when the budget was originally submitted, you said the former commissioner had a request for 27,000. So this request is basically adding an additional 8,000 to address what the current commissioner is asking.
Actually, not, it's more confusing than that,
Okay.
because originally the request was not, and general numbers was 27,000, but did not include the fringe benefits and such. The new request is 45,000 in salaries, it did not include the benefits. So I adjusted this for the delta, plus added approximately 6,000 to 7,000, I don't remember the number, to also cover the fringe benefits in it. So the actual change in salaries from the initial request to this request went from approximately 27,000 to 45,000. And that's salaries without the bennies.
What is it with the business?
With the bennies, it's,
Because that's what we're gonna have.
yes. Hang on that. With the bennies, it's approximately 58,000, yes.
So that's what gets you to the 35 here?
Yes, the 35 will cover the cost, because that's includes the 27,000 that's originally in the budget, plus 35,000, which gets you to approximately 58,000, which is the salaries with the benefits. $62,000. Excuse me?
I said you wanna keep going up?
No, I actually did the rule, I put it in the
We're
Excel
good now.
spreadsheet.
45, 58, 62. We're good at 62?
Yes.
I'm gonna take your pick.
There was a day when I used to be able to add numbers very well in my head, and then Excel and calculators have ruined that.
I got a pencil.
I got a pen, but yeah. So when you put all these together, this is the 200,000 additional, which we dropped into this line here.
this includes, this assumes 16 firefighters hired?
Yes, and I'm gonna go into that one next.
Okay.
That assumes the 16, the 8 in February, 8 in September hiring. So the primary items that we had left outstanding from the last meeting we were bringing back that were discussed were these 4 items. Just the commissioner revenue restructure we discussed, and we're gonna go into that in a second. We also discussed a point in time, which was the $320,000, which was a recommendation to reduce the number of new teachers from 16 to 12. And when I looked at all the questions from supervisors, there was 2 different scenarios proposed for changes. One was at 12 firefighters and the other was at 8 firefighters. If the board was to decide to change it to 8 firefighters and you hired them in September, that'd be a savings of approximately $450,000. If the board was to go with the 12 firefighters, and our assumption we made here was you hired 8 in September and 4 in February, your savings would be $254,000. So if the board desires, I can move forward first and do the commissioner of revenue, and then go to the discussions on the others, or
How would the board like to handle? Is there something you want to see first?
Makes no difference to me.
That's new information to us, so why don't we go ahead and do that?
Thank you, Chairman. What were your questions?
No, for your presentation.
This is pretty much to, our office mirrors a lot of what the treasurer's office does. We're kind of like the front end, and the treasurer's office is kind of like the back end, and we do have a lot of collaboration between the 2 offices. And we have several staff that do similar tasks that the treasurer's office does. So we were just trying to align the salaries and put them in the same pay band. This is something that former commissioners, even the past 2, have tried to adjust over the years. And there have been several letters that have been presented over the years in regards to that. Pretty much, if you look at the essential functions of the treasurer's office versus the commissioner's office, a lot of them are parallel in the descriptions. So there are a few things that the treasurer's office, they do complete, and there's several items that our office completes that the treasurer's office does not. Both of us work simultaneously and to help support the community and work together with the taxpayers. We do have continuous growth, so therefore we're trying to maintain the staff that we have and cut down on the turnover. We have had several people leave our office and go to other localities and get significant pay increases for doing the same or similar jobs.
So you've lost people to the city, for example, right?
Yes,
Not that
sir.
we're naming names, but to other
Yes, sir.
localities.
Yes, sir.
And you feel that these new descriptions listed on this page better
They
describes
better-
what they actually do?
Yes, sir.
I know we depend on your office for analysis whenever there's a change in tax that we're
Well, and
considering
then-
or that comes from the state, so.
Correct. We do have funding from the comp board, but in addition to that, the training and development that has to go in place every time you hire a new staff, it can take a year to 4 to get them up to speed to where if you lose the senior account clerk, it'll take 4 to 6, because they have to cycle through several, reassessments to all sorts of abatements, FOIAs, understanding ERMs. There's a lot of different things that they review and look over.
And if I may interject, as you remember, we did the survey salary a couple of years ago, and it's actually been an ongoing process. It was actually the first project I worked on when I came here 2.5 years ago, and so we initiated the initial implementation, and then we met with different departments on an ongoing basis to adjust all those areas that the salary survey didn't seem to cover well. So the last two departments that we were working on to fix were the sheriff's department and the commissioner of revenue. As you realize, you've seen in the budget, we sent out the information, we have $290,000 in this year's budget for salary compression within the sheriff's department, and a lot of that was caused because of the salary adjustments to the lower salaries. And so this is the last department going through for the salary survey to get everybody to where we had debates and discussions with department heads.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
Yes.
ask, is there anything in your overall budget that could be reduced to help offset some of these costs?
I've currently looked, we're going into a reassessment year. The cost for postage and such is greater every other year. This is something that with some of the turnover rate, some of that money was available. So that's probably some of that $80,000 that Mr. Ballhofer was referring to from scenario D.
In looking at it, I understand your pain, I feel your pain losing employees, and I understand moving people up. I'm looking at the budget where we're making massive reductions and trying to get to 15 million. We're not there, and this is a small portion of it. I just have a hard time, I hate to say it, sounds old shoe, but tighten your belt, look under the couch, count all the pennies. That's where we need to be. I understand where you're from, but 62 is a lot of money maybe there's a different way you can handle the employees and accomplish the same thing. Thank you.
I absolutely agree that we need to look at different ways to cut costs. Some of the things that we have looked at in our office is something as simple as envelopes, making sure that the envelopes don't have my name on them. The envelopes will be able to carry through for future years if, it possibly be reused for 8 or 10 years from now. Some of the envelopes in our office still have not the previous Commissioner of Revenue, but the one prior to that. It sounds simple, but that adds up to an extra $12,000. We've stamped and put stickers on as much as we can, but we're to the point now where we can only put so many stickers. It sounds so simple, but some of the individuals and some of this amount, these are for some of the individuals that have worked for the county for over 17 years. And they're still making less than some people in other localities doing the same work.
And if I may interject, just because one change that was made that was of some significance is they promoted the GIS person, Derek, to be the deputy. Well, he's still gonna handle the GIS functions because he believes with the deputy functions and what he's doing in the managerial functions, he still has time to do GIS, which enabled them to then create a position for a assessor 3 without having to create a new position, so that created a salary portion there. So that was a fairly significant savings as opposed to bringing in a GIS and an assessor 3 in that.
Mr. Chair, I had a quick question for you. Commissioner, in the second page of your handout, where you have your chart and you have, the chart down below where it says proposed new salary, is that number, would that person get the countywide 4% raise over and above that, or is that?
Well, that would depend on when this went into effect. This is the situation where it's, we've constantly put, like, triage this over the years, because we have letters from our previous Commissioner of Revenues in regards to trying to adjust and having the salary and the career ladder put in place. So this is something that would still, if other offices have similar positions and they received that increase, and we just received this, they'd still be falling behind.
You had mentioned that the Commissioner of Revenue's office and the sheriff's, that every other department has been kind of adjusted salary, but these two have not. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. It's been a long process, and we've met with all the department heads, and they've gone over and made their recommendations for adjustments within employees, how to correct them to meet what was needed for the market. So subsequent to the salary survey, we met with department heads and we adjusted those on an ongoing basis.
And can I ask the treasurer, do you agree with, no, I just want to know what your,
Well,
what your staff does.
For the record, and I'm backing into, from the salary survey perspective, I know we got the compression. I know we got the compression issue with the sheriff's office because of the number of employees and the ability to try to hire. As I sit here and listen to this, I'm starting to wonder at what point was the positions not classified correctly in the salary survey, and if that's the case, it may be time that we do another salary survey, because you keep jockeying people around, the whole thing goes out the window. And obviously, since that salary survey, the only thing that has adjusted it is COLA or a few internal upgrades with regards to positions, but beyond that, I'm getting a sense that this thing's out of whack already, and we're only, as the county administrator mentioned, 2.5 years into it. That wasn't the design of it at the time. I assumed that all the departments did the paperwork and the effort to get everything listed correctly at the time. So from that perspective, I can't speak to that, but with regards to the similar to my office, my highest, with the exception of my immediate staff that are chief and deputies, I go from 211 to 215. There's 216s, 217s, that type of thing. So I'm not sure how that comparison came about.
Okay. Thank you.
And just for, on the salary survey, when they did the survey, it's impossible to go out there and survey and do a comparison on every position within a county, so you only pick select positions. If you try to do a salary survey where you do an analysis and a comparison with all the other communities at a position, no one will respond to your survey. So it's a standard procedure with surveys. You pick out which positions you're really going to do a detailed investigation of. And so that's the limitation of a salary survey. I'm not sure if everyone remembers when the president of the company came and did his presentation. He said, in order to minimize having to do salary surveys on an ongoing basis, you need to do two things. First thing you need to do is each year when you adjust the COLA, what you do is you don't just do pure COLA, you adjust part on the scale and part on the COLA, because that helps prevent long-term compression. So for instance, if a person got a 4% raise, you may take 2% and adjust the scale 2%, and then move them up one notch within the scale. If you try to do it all 4% COLA within the scale, you end up long-term creating compression. That's one of the big causes of it. So we started that. And on the other thing, what we want to do is on an ongoing basis, instead of doing a full-out salary survey all the time, because they're very expensive. The last one, $80,000, and that was the cheaper, so they can cost you $100, $150, is we want to, on an every year, pick out a handful of positions, year by year, survey certain positions, and you go department by department. That's what I did in the past. And that keeps your costs down, and it also keeps you, up to date when you're looking at positions.
Mr. Chairman, when was the last survey done?
The last survey was completed in approximately, I can tell you, November, December of 2021.
Okay.
For Supervisor Jewell, and further with that, the salary survey adjustments were implemented on July of 2022 at a cost to the county of $3.2 million. That salary survey cost us $82,500. And so, as I think someone's already said, we're only a short window out of when we have actually funded this salary survey. So, for the record, for those who are not sitting here, just so you know, it hasn't been that long.
So we have two issues, it seems. The fact that we hadn't addressed the findings of that study in two departments, and then the possibility that the classifications weren't right. You know, that's the presentation here. Is it possible to separate those two effects? You know, in other words, some of this is justified by perhaps by the salary study survey, and some of this is new as an adjustment, or is all of this an adjustment?
I think really it's all really part of the salary survey, because the salary survey will look at both. The most detailed part of the salary survey is when you look at individual positions, their classifications and such, and that's when we did the salary survey. You can only do so many of those because it's so detailed, and the other part is salary, the actual dollar amount. I think when you're looking at these sheets, the primary part of these sheets is actually the classification of the position, saying they're underclassified based on the duties they're performing.
And you agree with that? Your interactions with the commissioner's office put you on the spot?
I can believe, well, you can put me on the spot, 'cause I've looked at a lot of positions, I believe they're reasonable compared to other positions. And I will tell you, because then I've gone through this on 2 years with Seth in the past, when he was the former commissioner, and he was having a significant problem maintaining people, and it was the city of Winchester was coming over, and they were stealing our clerks. I can remember 3 of them, which they stole, and then they were going over to Winchester for significant increases in pay. So this is not Loudoun County stealing the employees, this was Winchester, which is
For a long, long time, we sit around and we talk about our employees being taken away by other counties. There's only one solution to that, because the other counties are paying more. But we don't want to pay more, that's okay. And we want to keep our taxes low, and we want to do all those things. There are repercussions to doing that, and one of those is, if I don't pay my guys enough, they're gonna go to work for Davenport, my competitor. So I have to make sure that I keep my people, I pay more. That costs me more, and that cost gets passed on to you. This is not a significant amount of money when I say in comparison to millions, but when we're tightening the budget, it's $62,000. And I'm sure other people in the room who have employees see the same thing I'm saying. Yes, you want to go to Loudoun County, you want to go to Fairfax, you want to make that drive, and I guess that's what you do. You're not going to solve that problem. This isn't going to solve that problem. You'll have this increase, and you'll still lose employees, because it's still not the same salary that they can get other places. You're increasing their salary here, and then they're going to go, thank you very much, but it's not competitive salary to next door. In Winchester or what?
And which always leads me back to the, it seems to be the great debate where people say, we're not competing with Loudoun County, because that seems to be one of the big people, and the truth is, We are competing with Loudoun County, but we cannot meet their wages, so there's no way we can ever meet the wages of Loudoun County here. It's impossible. We lost someone at the clerk of the courts, and they raised the salary, they almost doubled it. It was a single position, and the salary was raised $37,000, and if you were to do that, you could do it for one position, you do it for one position, and every other employee wants it, so, yeah, we are competing with them, but we cannot match Loudoun County, and that's true.
I don't think we cannot, we do not desire to do it. We can match it, but who wants to pull that out of your pocket?
You cannot match it when unless you decide to find a way to find the money to match it.
That's what I mean. So, you know, we are where we are, and I like where we're at. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying, you just have to really be tight around the belt and do the best we can.
Well,
And that's not just you, I'm talking about we're talking about all the counties.
absolutely, Supervisor Wells. The thing that we also have to look at, these are the front line, these are the ones that are going out here and finding the revenue that is being missed. These are the ones that are going to work harder with us. And this is something that has, I was able to locate letters from the past commissioners in regards to the career letters and the career development and such, and equalizing their pay structure to mirror more of the office that's doing similar tasks.
How many of these positions are certified through
We have-
commissioners?
We
Bruce?
actually have, my apologies, we actually have 5 that are master deputies, and we have 7 that have enrolled in classes. And if anybody had any questions, the Master's Deputies program, it takes at least 36 months to complete it, and it's an ongoing training course, and you do have to keep your certification up by attending new classes, and it's new ways to process and make sure revenue is equitable and accurate.
So we could take it up later in the meeting or go around for a consensus now with the supervisors. It still seems to me that there's a portion of this, not that I'm trying to split the difference, but there's a portion of this that was hinted at that might be relevant because we hadn't addressed this. This was one of 2 parts of the county that we hadn't addressed. So separately from the reclassification, is there a compression or another issue that we need to cover?
I don't believe this is too much of a compression issue. I believe it's more of a classification and a request to adjust the salaries based on functions, if I'm not mistaken.
So you said we hadn't done the sheriff's office or the commissioner of the revenue's office. You don't find any other shortcomings to resolve, it's just this classification issue?
Within this department, yes. In the sheriff's department, it's purely compression. I think at some point in time, the sheriff will be coming back to this board. I'm not sure in the near or the long-term future where he'll be looking at restructuring in some shape or form, but I think that's long-term, not short-term. But his issue right now is compression.
How would the board like to, would you like to make a decision tonight, or if we have another work session, do you need time to think through this and make a decision at the next work session? We have, it's the last item on the agenda, how much time we have. The final budget isn't due to the end of June, but we like to get, there are certain steps along the way. Of course, we like to finish earlier if we can.
Correct.
Which way do I want to go? Put someone on the spot to defer or suggest going one way or the other now? Vice Chairman, I'll start with you this time.
Yes, I'd like to give it a little more thought than having to make this decision this evening. A couple things come to mind that I'd like us maybe to think about a little more, so.
I really think it should be deferred.
Defer. Supervisor Wells?
I told you how I feel about it, so.
Yeah.
Work session preliminary, all want to do.
Well, not in
I'm
addition, we're
I'm
not
not in
adding to our
favor,
work,
I'm not
just-
in favor of spending 62,000.
Very good, thank you. Supervisor Leon?
I'm good with deferring till later time.
Supervisor Dunn?
Defer.
So we have a consensus to defer, but if you'd like to state any.
We can defer, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
fine with thinking through this as well. I'm a big advocate for cutting where we can and not growing. With that said, I want to think about these positions. I visited your office and seen some of the work you do over the last few weeks, and I've seen the traffic. There's been a ton. I don't know who's in the lead, Dr. Hummer or you, for answering our requests in the last 2 weeks. So I do appreciate all the work you've been providing, and I guess we'll take this up, final decision at the next work session.
Thank you all, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Scott? Jack, back in the front there.
I do want to put this out there. If anybody has any questions or they would like to visit the office, please stop by. We can schedule an appointment or you can just come by at your convenience.
Thank you.
We have the other items on here. I guess this was discussion brought up of reducing, recommendation to reduce the teachers from 16 to 12. As I informed you at the last meeting, this board really can't say how they spend the money once it's been appropriated. However, the recommendation was this 16 to 12, and it came to approximately $320,000.
So quick question, clarification. It's not, is 16 the total number of staff they're adding? I thought it was a much larger number. This is,
Mr. Chair, I've got a little
Yeah.
breakdown on this.
thank you.
You can help me out, Dr. Hummer, if I misspeak. But I think they asked for 25 FTEs total, full-time equivalent. The 16 number was the general ed, in that 25. So the other 9 are specialty teachers, like special ed, ESL, that type of thing. So again, we realize that we're not the school board, we're not making specific cuts. But if you're looking for a rationale for the 320,000, it's approximately $84,000 per teacher, including benefits. So if I can back up and look at a couple of the enrollment numbers this year, and I know these numbers are kind of moving targets, okay? But this year is 14,156, and if you have updated numbers, Dr. Hummer, you can help me out with this. The proposal for next year is adding 271 students to that list, which if you didn't include the 9 specialty teachers, obviously they're gonna have people in their classrooms as well. If you did not include those 9, and you only took the 271 additional students that are coming in, if we gave them the entire 16 students, or 16 teachers, FTEs, that would be about 16.93 per classroom. If we cut it down to 12, that would be 271 divided by 12 would be about 22.58 students per classroom. So, but again, Dr. Hummer, if you can add anything to those numbers.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Great to see you all. First and foremost, we appreciate any additional dollars we will be receiving as a school system. And as Mr. Bolhofer mentioned, if it is going to be a cut of $320,000, of course, we will make that work. I would ask, though, and I respect the fact that there would be a rationale there, but when we cut specific positions, I want to be very careful of that, because there are specific positions that are required per certain class sizes, based on SOQs, based on title dollars, based on class size reduction, based on special education, and Mr. Laird, you know that, being in the school system. So cutting that down, we might need those positions based on meeting those requirements. So based on, and I kind of heard you mention some numbers and such, and it looks like you were dividing straight numbers, but keep in mind, each of our grade levels have different requirements, right? So for example, kindergarten is going to be treated differently than a 5th grade class, which is different treated than an 11th grade class, which also is different than a CTE class. So, and right now, we're at 14,300 students, and we are projected to be over 14,459 students, and those are projections. So we were projected to be at 14,089, and we are at 14,300. So as you can see, our numbers are increasing. This is based on those projections, and when we have those projections and an increase, and we have to fill those positions, we have to find those positions for somewhere. But keep in mind with these positions that we have proposed, this isn't a to get ahead of, this is based on the students that we are projecting to receive. The other thing that I mentioned during our budget presentation is one of the things that we are trying to do, as I hear you all talking as well, is being good stewards of our dollar. We went through all of our line items, and we found additional money that we could utilize in other areas. So that was an addition, that was less money that we were requesting from you all. It was a little over $400,000. And then we also put together what's called staffing standards, which I presented to you all as well. And these staffing standards are going to help us get ahead of making sure that we have a standard with how we are staffing our schools, from administrators to counselors to teachers, and we have a good projection of where those numbers are, and then that is how we determine how many additional staff members we would need, because we are understaffed when you take a look at those numbers in regards to how we're staffing our classrooms. The other aspect to that is we are looking at adding on 41 additional positions based on those staffing standards, but we were able to move current positions around so that we weren't requesting those 40 additional positions, we were only requesting 25. So to show that we were being good stewards of our positions, to show that we were being good stewards of our dollar, not just coming forward and saying, hey, we want 40 additional positions, we want this money, we were trying to be good stewards of that dollar. So again, if the request is to cut our budget that we originally proposed by 320, that's fine, we'll make that work. I just ask that you understand that we still might need those 16 general ed positions. So we still might have to find the dollars from somewhere else, which we can make that work. So I just wanted to mention that. So thank you, Mr. Lira. Hopefully I answered your questions.
I have a question. So you're saying that, first of all, I guess the question is, with the decrease of teachers, do you have a teacher in every classroom?
Yes, sir. Well, a licensed teacher?
A licensed teacher.
No, I wish we did, but no, we do not. We have long-term subs,
So you're using,
provisional
you're using
license.
subs, not teachers.
Is there an adult in every classroom? Yes.
You know what my question is.
Yes, sir.
You can bob around, you don't have a licensed teacher in every classroom.
Correct.
In the county, okay.
Correct.
Number two, you say you're gonna make it work. And so does that mean you're gonna take money, the school board is gonna say, well, we didn't get that money, so we're gonna take that money from this and move this over to help you fill your positions that you need?
Correct. So what?
I want everyone to understand
Yeah.
what's going on.
Can I elaborate on that?
Sure, please, I'd love to.
Yes, so essentially what is going to happen is if it is 320,000 less that we are receiving that you all approve, we then bring it to our school board to work through a budget work session to determine, do we want to find that money from somewhere else to fill those positions, or do we want to take the cut in those positions and just move forward with what we have? So we'll have those conversations. So again, it is not, at this point, it is not my decision. It will be my recommendation that we stick to those 16 positions, but the school board could make a decision to cut those positions, absolutely.
Dr. Hubbard, you have an elected school board, and so I may or may not be empathetic to that 320,000, but if I voted yes, it's not necessarily for the school teacher cuts. So you have other areas, personally, where I think you can make adjustments. That's a school board, so even if this goes through, you as a school board can take money from someplace else and fill those. And so you have a conservative school board that came to us with a 5 or 6% increase over the previous year. My comment to your school board, not to you, would be take a look at where you can go and make additional reductions if so, and make those reductions. For me personally, I probably would not make that cut, and go through the whole process and say, fine, you have to make the 320 cuts. Where is it least harmful, or where do you have excess? As we talked about before, personally, I have 2 other programs that I would cut more too quickly. From my perspective, they aren't needed, but your perspective may be different. But the comment is, we're not making a 320 cut on school teachers, we're making a 320 cut for total budget number, and then the school board makes, the adjustments with that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Chair, may I elaborate on that? So if you recall, our initial ask was 7 million for the operating. And that was then cut down to the $5 million and then potentially $320,000 less. But during that, unilaterally, the state is now considering additional dollars to give to the public school system. And as I've mentioned to you, and I will continue to mention to you, unless this changes with our school board, which I don't think it will, is any additional dollars we want to put towards our capital projects. So with that being said, at this point, it still looks like we are going to receive additional dollars, not as much as we bought from the House and which came out of the General Assembly, but we are still looking at additional dollars we will receive. Any additional dollars we were going to ask for us to utilize that towards capital projects. Not CIP, CAP. Those are those additional projects that we have to repair, replace, so on. So I say all that to say if we get $320,000 less from the locality, we would more than likely take it out of those dollars, and it would essentially be less dollars that we put towards capital projects. So we are getting additional dollars from the state that would help overcome this, and that is what I will be recommending to our school board. Again, as Mr. Dunn has mentioned, it would be for our school board to vote on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm absolutely against it. I mean, I'm sorry. The numbers we have watched and we're going to continue watching the growth in this county. And I think that the school board did a good job, and I think Dr. Hummer did a good job of laying out what he was trying to do here. It's not up to us to cut these positions they're trying. I've got so many friends that are teachers, and I've visited a couple of schools, and I know what they're dealing with, I understand, and I think we need to support the schools. I think that, I don't agree with throwing that 207 more. I don't. And we'll see if I'm wrong next year. But I just, with the way it's, the trajectory we've seen in this county, especially in the last 2 years, I mean, we're over 916 homes last year. And you've seen what's coming down already this year. So I'm just not there with this at all.
Any other comments or questions from supervisors? Thank you, Doctor. I would just back up a level of my thoughts. It's something I was going to pose at the end of the work session, or perhaps at the next work session, and that is, we got a budget book when we began this process, and it lists every department, office, with the division of the county, and it shows a % increase, but that % increase, I believe, in the first tab of the budget book excludes salaries and other factors. So we have different tabs, right? We have capital and salary, and so as we get close to being done, it would be great to go back to each of the departments and see what their % increase is, minus the last couple of changes we're considering in the last couple of weeks, so that we can take a look at which departments are growing more than others, maybe for need, for improvements in services. And we are trying to improve services. We're trying to get more firefighters so we can be more responsive. We're trying to get more teachers, more facilities, and always more roads built. And that's the reason we're going through these exercises of prioritizing and deciding. So I'm not suggesting that we would look at something and then go through yet another round of cutting, but just so that we can see and justify to our constituents what we're doing. I know some groups, the teachers may be getting more raises than other county employees on average, just the way that they've close to handle their budget. There may be, vehicles in some departments that are more so than others. I don't think that we have to drill down to that level, but it'd be great to see a top level for each department with everything included, what we're looking at, scenario D or scenario D adjusted, whatever we wanna call it, that rolls salaries, benefits. I don't know if we'd include capital in that or keep that as a separate category. I wanna think about it, but I wanted to put that out to the supervisors, see if you wanna see the same kind of data, where are we at with the changes that we're proposing this year. As one constituent came to our last board meeting and pointed out, we were voted and entrusted to be, I think his word was conservative, but I think he meant cautious, careful with taxpayer dollars, and yet our proposed budget is significantly larger than last year's, and I took that to heart. I want to see exactly where we're larger and what services we're proposing to expand as we go on. Maybe that's a good segue into our next subject. Unless we want to take some vote or defer this to the final decision as well when we balance. So I'll go around the other way and see if you want to.
Yes.
Cheryl, welcome back, and I hope you're feeling much better.
Okay, thank you. So for us to go to all of those departments and apply a salary increase and then adjust all the fringes, we keep it in one pot, that's for merit contingency, because the numbers keep on changing, a 4%, a 4.5%, a 5%, whatever it is. And so we would have to go back and look at the amended budget, because this year's current original budget wouldn't have a salary increase because it's done the same way. So we're gonna have to create an amended budget, and then we're gonna have to go into 800 line items and change their salaries and calculate their benefits. So it's not something that's easy for us to turn around. We can try to give you something, but not that level of detail.
So is there an easier way to synopsize each department? So, we have those changes in the first tab, for example, which are now adjusted a bit, and then there's new positions. So we could list how many new positions, that might be easy to do, that each department's getting. And then everybody's getting the same COLA, right, except for the schools operate on their own decisions.
Yes, yes, but like the
And then there's
positions.
compression, so there's,
Yeah, like the positions, am I adding 8? Am I adding 8 plus 4? So, like in that situation, what would I be adding to fire and rescue?
well, we're gonna discuss that next.
Okay.
Maybe that's one we can make a decision today or not. I've heard some strong opinions for supervisors, and you would have that answer, but we have deferred one or two. So you would have to pick one and just annotate and say, I'm assuming for these couple of staffing decisions we have yet to make.
So when I go into that, I don't wanna keep on going into the general ledger and making changes based on kind of what we're sort of gonna do. Because those are 100 pages of 100 line items that have to be changed. So I can kind of give you general information, not 100% detail.
And if I may elaborate with the way the system is, it is, when you get into salaries, and I've discussed this with y'all, how difficult that is, we can give you good approximations on the salaries, we can give you real good numbers on the basic operating costs, and then the real analysis will come in for us, and we start looking at those one-time items that may hit a department year by year. For instance, let's say you take a look at the sheriff's department 1 year, and that 1 year within the operating, because laptops aren't capital, you may see this big jump. So we also have to have explanatory information. So I think we can give you some good information. There will be some deficiencies, but we can explain those.
And really, if we get the same increase that's comparable to the current year, you should be able to look at this document in the blue and white and get what you need. Because capital's not in this year, capital is not in next year. New positions are not in here yet. So this should be able to serve as a great starting, and then we can elaborate on this if you have additional questions. Does that make sense?
I think we can come back with something that accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish. Just so you know, it won't be perfect.
I'm just trying to understand and be able to answer constituents when they say, so the budget's gonna grow a bit. And you're trying to provide more firefighters and more specific services, and that explains why one department is growing as much as it is. And we have constituents from all different interest groups, right? People who want to have Lake Frederick receive faster emergency service, and people who are very invested in the schools and want to make sure that we're providing all the teaching, all the way across the board. I just want to have a summary understanding before, otherwise, I don't really have that until the
We
budget
can,
book comes out next fall.
right, we can look at kind of where we're at and show the increased dollars that we are generating or receiving and where those dollars go. Would that help you?
I think so, yeah. I think we focused on spending and where we can save money.
Yeah, we can do something like that.
Maybe not so much on the revenue side, understanding all those pieces, yeah.
So we can look at what categories like public safety, education, general administration, health and welfare. And we can look at where our dollars are going and what services are costing more.
So there's a danger in what I'm suggesting, that it'll be more work than I realize I'm asking for. So I want to go around and suggest, and it's fine if, we decide otherwise, but do you want to see some kind of summary so you know at a top level per department how much they're growing budget-wise or shrinking, if that was the case? Or are you comfortable with threading together everything we've done in our work sessions without asking for such a summary? Who did I start with last time? Do you understand what I'm asking for, and do you agree? And if not, that's fine. I don't want to create too much and disrupt what else you're doing.
Yeah, I don't want to create a whole lot of work on them, but I understand why you're asking for it, and, I think about Supervisor Wells's comment when Commissioner's here, and, we don't want to increase, we're trying to obviously keep taxes low, we're trying to work with the amount of money that we have, and I think we're trying to do a good job of spending taxpayers' money wisely. It's a great suggestion to see it if you can do it, but I don't want it to be a waste of.
You're asking for a high-level view when I kind of feel like you have the detailed view that would serve you better, honestly.
Well, we made adjustments throughout the book, right?
So what we can do is we can take what we know as far as cuts, and we can apply that, and then we can give you something like this, maybe not the detail on the right, but just the increases, and tell you where we landed.
So some updated in the format you're already used to producing.
But we will not apply all the salaries increases to all the departments.
And I already have a working model where I track every department year by year. It's much easier with historical data than it is with budget data. And I believe taking that model, I can make those changes and get a pretty good approximation. There may be some difficulty with salaries, but any of the difficulties or questions can be explained with explanatory notes. As I said, for instance, from my analysis, you'll look at one department one year, you'll see this big giant increase, then you look, oh, there was $700,000 in this one-time expense.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask you a
Yes.
question with regards to what specifically are you trying to get at? Because with the summary that is provided to the committee in the blue and white gives you a summary of the adjustments by department, and then when you go back under the general fund expenditures, you have the prior 3 fiscal years plus the current year request, with the exception of salaries. And salaries are bucketed in one group, and it costs X at 4% or 4.5% or 5%. Are you looking for individual salaries? I mean,
No, I'm looking for an updated summary, I guess.
Well,
for each department.
once the budget is determined in the appropriation, that will be early next fiscal year.
If I may suggest, if I could send out to a sample of what I have, the model, and see what you think. I've worked on it for quite some time. I think it's, will give you the information you're looking for, as long as you understand there's explanatory notes to make up for any deficiencies in the data or inability to get certain data.
But how does that differ from what we got?
Yeah. My comment to you, Mr. Chairman, is, you're in here in the middle of the budget season, so we started in November, whatever. For the FY '26 budget, my comment to you would be, start in September. take department by department, you can take a look at a zero-based budget, meaning you have to defend everything that's there, and then go through, and where you know that, it's good, fine, if you know it's not. And as an example, you know, this county's been around for a long time, so if you found in the current budget, you know, money for hay for horses, obviously it's not being facetious. If you take a zero-based budget, and you walk through, piece by piece, department by department, you know, you'll see where you are, and maybe that helps you achieve the cost savings you're looking for, to support that type of situation. I think you have to go through that detail. I don't think we have the time here this year to do that. I think it's a good start for next year.
That's a little different than I was thinking, but I agree with that thought. In fact, Mr. Pollock and I talked about that last week, I think. Digging into departments maybe one by one and looking at the total rather than thinking incrementally. But of course, there's many, you know, if you gave each one a month, you're gonna be many years before you got done looking at it that way. That's a different thing. I just thought we need an update of where we're at right now, other than the single column scenario table. But if you think that, from your perspective and having to produce it, you think that's not adding to what we have?
If we can take the scenario D and we can go and make those cuts, and then we can give you an updated spreadsheet. We can do that. I don't know if it's gonna tell you anything, because you're not gonna have new positions in there, probably not. Maybe you will. You're not gonna have capital in there.
Well, there's been a lot of different discussions going on, and I don't want to try and thread through them about how it'd be great if it came in a different format, if we had everything rolled up rather than separated by tabs, if there was another way to look at the data per division.
Can we talk about the firefighters, because we're running out
Yeah.
of time here, let's do
We
this.
do need to move ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna go on, and I was looking at my, agenda here to think easy, and we didn't put anything easy on here tonight, so I guess we might as well go with firefighters and keep it, going at the same level we've been going. So the firefighters, you know, initially in the budget, there were 16 firefighters, of which 8 would be hired, and I said this several times, in September and February. We had 2 recommendations to the questions. One was to reduce it to 8 firefighters, which if that were the case, we'd hire in September. And the other recommendation was 12 firefighters, of which 8 would be in September and 4 in February. The savings of those 2 scenarios are up there, and that's the beginning for firefighters.
Can I ask you a question? Did we cut 8 last year because we thought we were getting the SAFER grant? Is that accurate?
We did not cut 8. We actually had 8 that were going through the hiring process. Our intention was to get the grant to get 16 firefighters. So this is hiring those same 16 firefighters. The really only difference is now there won't be the federal funding that would pay the salaries for 3 years. But this is the 16 firefighters. And the original 10-year plan that the fire chief presented to this board a year ago, the plan was ongoing to hire 8 firefighters a year for 10 years.
Correct, but 8 each year. Did we hired those 8 last year?
Last year, those 8 have either been hired or are being hired, yes, but there was 8 budgeted to be hired last year. I believe they have been hired.
There are 16 this year, which is 8 more than they requested, or?
No, they requested 16 this year, and that was the idea, but the reason it was 8 a year, that was an estimate over 10 years, but the fact that the intention is to get a fire station 22 online in 3 years was to get the 16 firefighters at this point. Even though you would have them before the station, there's a need for firefighters in other stations, so they would be allocated to those departments till at such time they were needed at the station.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So I don't know if we want to go around for a consensus. I know I've heard from all of you that that's why we invested in that idea, that we do need to be able to respond with fully crewed fire trucks rather than having 2 on staff so often in some of our stations. The only question was, the only question I had was yours plus the progress of Station 22. When will that be online, and so that we need to staff that. And as you said, about 3 years at this point.
You mentioned just 3 years, we're currently getting ready to, bring to this board 3 options for properties. We obviously, because it's a property purchase, it would be more than likely done in a closed session. We have hired an engineer because we need to look at 3 properties just to verify what any site work is needed, egress, ingress, stormwater, and utilities, et cetera. The 3 years is the target.
And my question was yours as well. That's what I brought up last work session, whether we had delayed hiring 8 because of the SAFER grant. And I'm still a little confused. It sounds like we would be absorbing the cost of the 16 that we had hoped we were gonna get a grant for. So it's an add to our expense, not an add to our plan and how much we had wanted to staff out. So do we as a board wanna hire all 16 at the county's cost at this time, as we plan to do, knowing that we didn't get the SAFER grant, I think is the way to phrase it. I see a frown. Oh, Supervisor Dunn.
So, on this issue, I'd be a strong proponent of hiring all 16. When you hire somebody, you hire them on day 1, they have to go through training, the training's a 6 to 9 month time frame, then they get experience as they go. So if you're gonna have a new station, which I also support, you need experienced people there when they arrive. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, we currently have delay times, when you take a look at response times, where those people can be used to help alleviate that issue even before the new station is done. Number 3, I think all of us need to understand, you're gonna hire 8 people each year, the next 10 years. And that's gonna cost you a ballpark of $1 million. Build that into your budget. If you don't do that, then the question is, are you satisfied with a delayed response time? Or are you satisfied with a situation where you have 2 men going to a fire and not being able to respond, there's no backup? That's a life and death situation. So this is one part of the budget where I think you need to put the money in. I think you need to hire the 16, but this is a public safety issue for me.
Thank you. I'll keep going around and see what the thoughts are, since we're short on time. Supervisor Lear.
I would concur with that. I was gonna mention the same thing about the pipeline. If we're talking about 3 years to get Station 22 online, there's a pipeline from the time that you hire somebody to they're proficient and ready to perform at that station. So I would be opposed to cutting any of the 16.
Thank you, Supervisor Wells.
Same thing, I think we need to go ahead and hire the 16, do the 8 in September and 4 in 8 in September, when is it?
8 in February.
In February, yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor Green, we've got to prepare for the future, and I mean, yes, we absolutely need hiring 16.
Vice Chairman.
I've already shared with you that I certainly was in agreement that we move forward with this as well, from a public safety perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Cheryl, we gave you one answer, at least. And then the only subject left was future topics and work sessions.
Yes, and the initial intention was to begin the discussions at the next session, to discuss the capital plan for the schools, the overcrowding, and whether or not you need another school. That was what we had discussed at the last meeting. It may be you want to delay that one and deal with the operating budget first. That's whatever the board wants to do. I will tell you, we also have other future meetings. We discussed at a meeting quite some time ago that during the budget, we'd have a closed meeting. We wanted to discuss constitutional officer salaries. That was requested. We're gonna need a meeting for outside agencies that we're gonna schedule to bring those in that the board would like to speak to. And it's just to let the board know going forward with this, if and when, well, not if, when the board does the operating budget, you do not have to have your capital budget or your school capital budget done at the same time. The operating budget is probably the one that needs to be done the soonest, because we don't want to run into the issue, as you know, we discussed at a certain point in time in the schools, they have to do contracts and they need information. There are workarounds if you can't get it done in a timely fashion, but so for the board, it really is to determine next week if they would like to stay with the operating budget or go right into the next meeting, workshop, to discuss begin the discussions on the schools.
So that's our challenge. And if there's a planning commission meeting next Wednesday,
Yes, there is.
so we would be time restricted at the back end in case we were left for punishment, want to try and get both done at the same meeting. So, any comments?
Yeah, quick comment. I'd like to see a joint school board of supervisors meeting to talk about school capacity. If we could do that in, May or June, I don't want to push that off indefinitely. I'd like to see the 14 of us get together, lay out some thoughts and comments, and then come back, with a subsequent meeting to address the issues that we all raised. I mean, for example, at $152 million high school, my question would be, how's that cost break down? Show me how you arrive at 152. If you can go do an addition to another school, show me the cost of how you arrive at it. Lay out timeframes. So I'd like to have that type of in-depth conversation, where it could be a good conversation, and then have a follow-up, whatever issues that we all raised, to address that and do that sooner rather than later, after this budget process, but, in the May, June timeframe, not next year.
And if I may interject, that was part of the plan, was to have this board meet first, make sure this board had determined what it would like for the agenda meeting with the school board and schedule on this board, and then, and I think at the supervisors meeting, the vote was made to have a series of meetings to solve this issue.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say, I'm sorry, Vice Chair. I'd like to say sooner rather than later as well. It's the topic that the constituents that I've heard from have the most interest in right now in the county. So sooner rather than later if we can.
Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, I think there's a lot of preliminary work that could be done ahead of us meeting. And I requested that we direct staff to go ahead and move forward with deciphering the $150-some million request and knowing what makes up those numbers, what the capacity is that's being requested, and going back from other schools that have built high schools in the past. They've had an expert come in, evaluate those plans once we know what square footage we're looking at, what the capacity request is, and hopefully having something for us to look at when we actually do sit down. So I think it would be imperative that our staff works with the school staff to discern what that information is, even before we have a sit down. So we have something to look at and know what makes up those numbers. We need to know what we're paying for. What does that 155 plus million equate to over a 5-year period? And then we can advance on as far as A&E, the CIP referenced an ensuing year of a $9 million expenditure. We should know what that makes up that expenditure. How much is architectural and engineering and such. So I think there's a lot of work that could be done even before we have a sit down to make our time used in the best way possible.
And we took it from the last meeting based on the discussion that we were gonna bring an outside expert, whether an architect, engineer, contractor, someone with knowledge, skills in schools, to bring them in, provide us the guidance on that. We were gonna look for someone that's done schools before, and that could provide this board, I think this direction was, with a lot of information, of which we don't always have the expertise. And I've had discussions myself and Wyatt and the planning staff of finding the right person, group to come in and do that.
And just for an example, we keep talking about enrollment numbers, and we need updated enrollment numbers as updated as possible. For example,